Hello and welcome to The Wrap. Thanks to Coates, I'm Kate McCarthy, and joining me to round out round 12 of the home and away season is Gemma Bastiani. Gem, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Always excited to be on The Wrap, but I'm glad to be doing it with you today.
And it is a massive round 2 wrap up, the last round of the home and away season. If we have a look at the results now, there were surprises everywhere, Gem.
There were. I mean, the first night, though, not a surprise. North Melbourne getting a massive win, 24 in a row. We will get to that, but the Blues running over the top of the Eagles was pretty significant. The one thing to note out of all of this is that until that very last game, it was the away teams winning, and if Freo had won, they would have made it into finals, but they couldn't keep the trend alive.
So all those lucky people that didn't put their tips in this weekend had a lot of success, maybe lucked out a little bit. Let's have a look, though, as the ladder, how it shaped up, because, as you said, that final spot was up for grabs right until the last fixture of the afternoon.
It was, and West Coast thought they were dead and they were back alive again. But St Kilda probably the one that are disappointed with where they ended up finishing, thought they would get that win, but now have to travel for their final. So it is an interesting one, but the Swans outside the 8 with so much hope early in the year.
I did have a lot of hope. Now, if you are a lucky supporter of one of those teams in the top 8, you will want to see this next slide very quickly. It is the matchups that we've got. So we'll have Friday night. It will be the same matchup that we saw this Friday, but at Icon Park, North taking on Hawthorn. Carlton and West Coast on Saturday afternoon at Icon. Melbourne and Brisbane Sunday at 1:05 p.m. And then we do go to Norwood. St Kilda couldn't quite get the job done against the Dogs, so they have to travel now for that game. That's a big turnaround when you think that you're probably going to be playing at home. You end up flying to Adelaide for the Saints.
It's a huge turnaround because also Adelaide, I know they've been a bit shaky this year, but they're a team you don't want to play in finals, even then when their backs are up against the wall, because if anyone's going to turn it on in finals, it is Adelaide. But we also have two matchups that are happening for the second time in 2 weeks.
Well, you just touched on Adelaide. Let's have a look then how they got the victory over the Fremantle Dockers. It was 12 points in the end, and it was a mini elimination final to start with. And as you said, they flexed their muscles in finals.
They did, and it was Grace Kelly who got the job done in front of goal. Out of their 4 goals, she kicked 2. She was also just very clean. And then the 100-gamer, Anne Hatchard, huge mark and goal late in the game when they just needed to put a little bit of a gap on the scoreboard. But full credit to Fremantle, who will be devastated with this result. Philippa Seth, her last game, as we found out post-match. But just the fact that they were even there, fighting for that spot. We know that they gave up 100 points in 2 consecutive weeks earlier in the year. To still be part of that conversation late on, I don't think any of us saw that coming.
Well, the footy gods were certainly shining on Anne Hatchard, kicking that match-winning goal in her 100th game. Let's get across now to Moorabbin, because the Saints, they had everything to play for to finish up with a home final. They're already qualified for finals before this game, but it was the Dogs that got the job done by a whopping 45 points, Gem.
Yeah, and the Dogs did say that they knew they couldn't make finals, but they wanted to wreak some havoc on the way through, and that's exactly what they did in this one. If you're Tam Hyatt and the Dogs, though, you're looking back at that game against Geelong last week thinking, what could have been? There were about 5 minutes where they played poorly, lost that game, but they could have made it into the finals. But Emma McDonald, she was the star of the show. First-year player, has a Rising Star nomination already. She's going to be the best key forward in the game very, very quickly, Kate.
Well, get excited if you're a Dogs fan, because what we saw from Emma McDonald this afternoon was nothing short of exciting. But for the Saints, it's more misery because their injury list just seems to get longer and longer. A couple of late-outs pre-match and some concerning signs for some of their stars.
Yeah, the list keeps getting longer, and it's not players that you can afford to lose. Ash Richards earlier in the year is such an important player, those sorts of people. But now Jamie Lambert, if anyone, you need them in a final, especially against Adelaide. You need that gritty inside midfielder. And if Jamie Lambert's out, I do question their finals credentials now.
You feel like those injuries are really starting to take a toll with the Saints. Let's get to Vic Park, though, because it was the Lions who got the job done by 20 points. Could have been a greater margin, though. 6 goals, 16 is what they ended up kicking against the Pies. And Craig Starcevich addressed that in his post-game presser.
The old thing in footy, once one person misses, the next person takes on the pressure of the next shot, and that just compounds and just gets worse and worse at times. So we'll keep talking about it. We'll get it right at some point, but we'll need to in the next month or so, because we've got high stakes games coming up.
Yeah, he's correct. It has been a little bit of an issue, Gem, that's not just happened in this week on its own, isolated issues. It's been something that's sort of popped up a little bit throughout the Lions season.
Yeah, the Lions have won their last 7 in a row to get back into that strong position. But as you said, 6-16 in this one. They're only 1 behind away from the all-time AFLW record of behinds, which is 17, which was the Lions in round 8 against the Gold Coast Suns. So as part of that run home, they have been a little bit missing in their opportunities in front of goal. In the first few weeks of the season, when they weren't quite hitting their straps, they were still goaling at an accuracy over 50%. So that's been the big downturn in their season. It's something that they're going to want to fix. So we can't just blame the weather conditions in this one. It was very windy. It was very hot out there. I got a sunburn. But the fact that it has been a trend and not a one-off, if I'm Craig Sarstridge, I'm a little bit worried.
You can see the relief on Dakota Davidson's face there, where she finally slotted a major late in the game. Now, down at GMHBA, we had a number of retirees in the Geelong and Melbourne game, but Melbourne ultimately got the job done by 14 points in the end, and Eden Zanker, she is in some fine form heading into finals.
She is. All eyes were on Kate Hoare heading into this one. She was on the 98 goals. Wanted to see if she could hit the ton before finals, but it was Eden Zanker who starred inside 50. And what I love about the way Eden plays, she's so deceptively strong in the one-on-one. She's not their tallest forward. She's not their biggest forward, but she can compete like anyone else. Copped a knock to the face, came back on, kicked another. But I just love the weapons that Melbourne has in attack, whether it's Kate Hoare, whether it's Eden Zanker. Taylor Harris has been played in a couple of different roles this year, which I really like from Mixtoneer, but he's got levers to pull, and that is so important.
Well, you say he's got levers to pull. They played the Lions only a week ago. They couldn't get the job done. What needs to change then for them to be able to get the win?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Brisbane needing to take their chances in that game against the Lions. Melbourne didn't take their chances in the first half, and then it ran away from them. So I think finding those moments and standing up in those moments is really important. But the other thing the Lions did really well was shut down that ability to get the contested possession into that outside space. They limited that. So if Melbourne can be a bit slicker on the handball, a bit calmer under pressure, that will do them wonders.
All eyes will be on that game again this finals round. But let's get to West Coast, because they unfortunately couldn't get the job done over the Blues, and it looked like they were in for some disappointing, rest of the round. But Carlton, they stormed home and they returned to finals for the first time since 2020, Gem.
Yeah, they've gone from a historic review into a finals return, and Tara Bahana was a big part of that. Mimi Hill was a big part of that. But just the belief that they can keep going in that last quarter. They've still got something to give. And then this Das Barrel just put the perfect cap on their home and away season. It was almost the moment of the round. We will get to the moment of the round a bit later, but it was almost there.
Yeah, Das, a little bit stiff to miss out on the moment of the round when you kick a beautiful barrel after the siren, but there was another goal after the siren that was just eclipsing that barrel from Darcy Vesio. But I mentioned Tara Bohanna and how important she was to the Blues last week. For me, she's the recruit of the year. But you've mentioned today a player that's probably as pivotal to their success. They got Mim Hill back on the weekend, and she was everywhere.
Yeah, I think those are the two players that Carlton can least afford to lose. Tara Bahana gives them that structure ahead of the ball, but Mim Hill is the chain. So she's the one that can actually turn that inside contested possession into outside movement, just like we talked about Melbourne needing against Brisbane this weekend. So that ability to just be clean, she never has to stop or fumble the ball. She can take it in her stride, continue to move and hit up teammates beautifully. The way she finds space away from a direct opponent, huge. But I think the Eagles will have a returning player that might get sent to her because she is so important.
Well, the Eagles thought they wouldn't be returning if we have a look at some of the scenes post-match, and the writing seemed like it was on the wall for them, and it didn't look like with the loss they'd be able to play finals for the first time in their team's history. They even chaired off Dana Hooker, who will have to quickly unretire, because the good news is, West Coast, you are playing finals for the first time in your club's history, because a very unusual result occurred and Essendon got the win over Sydney in Saturday afternoon's fixture. But Essendon were getting some support from the West Coast Eagles. If we have a look at some of the Instagram posts, Essendon are now West Coast's second favourite team, Gem.
Gee, if I was a West Coast player, I would be all aboard that as well. It was a result that we didn't see coming, that Essendon would win. Essendon had been on an 8-game losing streak, had really struggled, had to name a top-up player in Bailey Hunt, no Maddie Prespakis, but the way they just ground out that game, they've now beaten the Swans in all of their matchups by 4 points, 3 points and 3 points. They've not necessarily been the most attractive kind of footy, but all credit to Essendon and probably a bit of soul-searching for the Swans because they just didn't know how to fix the problems that were presented to them and didn't kick a goal until the last 4 minutes of the game.
Yeah, you were kind there saying that it wasn't the easiest to watch. This was a slogfest. And yes, partly due to the weather, but it was a real contested game of football and a couple of goals kicked in the end. But Essendon, they got to go out on a high, as you said. A top-up player in Bailey Hunt playing. She got her first win for the club. And the Swans looking dejected post-match, but it was a bit of a trend for them if we have a look, Gem, at their last 8 games.
Yeah, the way that they have been unable to stem the flow of what an opposition team has been able to do early in games and just it kind of runs away from them has been a concern. And as you've seen, the last 8 games of their season, 2 wins in that one. Those wins, a little bit unconvincing. Carlton did not have Mimi Hill or Tara Bahana in that team. West Coast didn't have Ella Roberts in that team. So really important players out when they did get the wins as well. Little bit of a concern. If I'm the Swans, I'm looking desperately at what changes we can make to be a little bit more flexible in-game and be willing to take the risk to make those changes. So not just have them there to use, but actually use them because momentum is everything.
Yeah, well said, Gem. Let's go to Friday night now. And North Melbourne, they broke the record, 24 wins in a row. It was third quarter dominance really from them that got the job done over the Hawks.
Yeah, and you don't win 24 games in a row without players like Amy Smith, who's on the screen there, Tess Craven, who kicked that goal earlier. They are players that I know North fans will absolutely adore, but they're not the star players at the top of the team. They're players that play a role so clean, they play the system so well, and other teams would be desperate to be able to develop players like that. And that's the thing that North Melbourne does better than any other team is develop players that no one really thinks are going to have that big of an impact, but make them premiership players.
Yeah, their ability to find talent and develop talent is a real feature of their program. Talent that is thriving in their program is Talia Randall. They went with a selection call that was a little bit, I guess, I wasn't expecting it, the Hawks. They didn't pick Jess Vukic, who was available, and it was the Talls really that got a hold of them inside forward 50. Do you think they'll change it come next week when they play the Roos again?
Yeah, I think I can understand the decision-making from Dan Webb. So you asked him pre-game, what's the reasoning behind not picking Iraq? Obviously, Lucy Wales is out with that appendix surgery that she recently had. Wanting to bring ground-level pressure, and that's the way to beat North Melbourne is ground-level pressure. I respect that as a decision, but when you see the Talls get a hold and you think Mac Erdley sitting in the ruck when she could be adding a little bit more height down back if Jess Vukic was in the team, yeah, I wonder if that changes, especially at Icon Park compared to Frankston. You expect it to be a better day for Talls. That could also play into the decision-making.
And especially when you add Kate Shearlaw, who was rested in that game. So there's another Tall to take care of if you are Hawthorn's defence. But we had a number of celebrations over the weekend, some more 100 Club players. And Gem, I want to play you something that we saw over the weekend. And I want you to tell me one of these things is not like the other. As we see Shannon Campbell getting chaired off in her 100th game. We then saw Anne Hatchard, who was chaired off in her 100th game. And then when we go to North Melbourne, can you pick the difference here? What is the difference when you see this chairing off compared to the other two?
Look, I don't see any opposition players there, no Hawks players there, which is kind of remarkable given how universally loved Jasmine and respected Jasmine Garner is.
Yeah, she is. And for me, this was one that I didn't like the look of over the weekend. Yes, you say Jazz Garner. She is one of the most respected and universally loved players of the competition. And I think this is a really poor look from Hawthorn as a club. This isn't on the players, though, I don't think. When you lose a game, there's other things that you're thinking about. You're devastated. This is on the leadership and probably the administration, so your manager or someone that's at the game that's all across the logistics of what's happening in the game. There needed to be Hawthorn players present at that for mine. Every other team, Fremantle have just been knocked out of the competition. They would be devastated. they still formed a guard of honour for Anne Hatchard. And I don't think this went unnoticed by North Melbourne players either, as we see what Alice O'Loughlin commented on an AFL Women's post about Jazz Garner at Hawthorn, AFLW, where you at? And to be honest, I support Alice O'Loughlin in pulling that out. It adds a little bit of spice, but for me, just a really poor look from the club, Gem.
Yeah, at some point in that post-match, someone needed to realise, whether it was an administrator, whether it was a social media person, whether it was their media manager, whether it was one of the players, they needed to realise they should have been there. Big miss from the Hawks for me.
Big miss for sure. Someone that did not miss was our player of the round, thanks to Coates, and it was Gemma Houghton.
Yes, Gemma Houghton, Stephen Bradbury'd the 100 goals. No one had her as the player a couple of weeks ago to potentially be the first to kick 100 in the competition's history, but footy gods were on her side with the way that ball bounced. She is a remarkable player, Gemma Houghton, and for the fact that it came down to an after the siren, everyone was screaming at Justine Mules-Roberts, just kick it inside. For it to be after the siren goal, and for them to have orchestrated a very special celebration for her was also brilliant. But I love this for Gemma Houghton. She's been an iconic player of the league. She probably gets lost in a few of those conversations too when we talk about a Jasmine Garner or a Kate Hoare. Gemma Houghton was a cross-code rookie who came to the sport because Ebony Antonio knew her brother and said, why don't you come down and check this out? And now we're at a point where she's kicking the first 100 goals in the comp. It's wonderful to see.
And one of the nicest players going around too, Gemma Houghton. So congratulations, first player to kick 100 goals, Gem. Thoroughly deserved. Let's go to the final game of the round where the Young Suns got it done. They were finished in 18th spot, but they got the win over Richmond by 14 points for their second win of the season.
Yeah, they seem to just tick every box with this one. Finish the season on a high, but also keep that number one pick that I anticipate will be traded out in a couple of weeks' time. But the lovely thing about this is they had their young players step up. We saw Havana Harris on the screen before. Darcy Davis had an important role to play, and a few of those other academy players, and then they will get a number of academy players in at the end of the year as well. So Reece Shaw is in a good spot list-wise come next year.
Yeah, you think they will have a good future ahead of them with some of the academy players that are coming through for the Gold Coast Suns. We know Richmond are reviewing their program. That was a very disappointing loss for them. That gets us, though, to new kids on the block.
Number of players kicked their first ever goal in AFLW footy over the weekend. Shelby Knoll did it with her first ever kick. Not a bad way to enter into the league. Sienna McMullen there. Georgia Knight did it as well in a pretty good celebration. Everyone got around Georgia Knight, who was an absolute energy maker for that club. Will be a very good small forward for the future. And then someone who's not necessarily a kid.
She's not a new kid on the block, Talia Gillard.
She's nearly reached 50 games, but Talia Gillard kicked. It was actually a really energy lifting goal for the Demons, just as Geelong were coming at them as well. So we love these celebrations. We love everyone getting around them, but I'm sure key defenders aren't super excited about having to run up and then run back to their position.
Well, she was a new kid to the forward line. That's how we snuck Talia Gillard in there. Let's have one final look now at what we are looking at for the first round of AFLW finals. Gem, what are you looking most forward to?
They're all salivating matchups, but I love the Melbourne-Brisbane rivalry. I'm so excited we get it in a final again. What about you, Kate?
I think it's the start of a new rivalry in the AFLW. I think North Melbourne and Hawthorn, with the extra spice added on that we've touched on today, I think that is going to be an absolutely cracking match.
And Alice O'Loughlin needs to make sure she doesn't get suspended for any future finals.
No, go your hardest, Alice. We love it. Well, that is the wrap for the end of the AFLW home and away season. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Coates.